this working? Can you hear me, guys? I don't know. I've never done this before. How? I have no idea if this is even working. Can you guys hear me? Anybody tell me if this... Can you guys hear me okay? I don't know if I set this up correctly. I don't know if I set this up correctly. Can you guys hear me okay? Oh, that's like, never mind. I don't know if this is working. If you're watching this, can you let me know if this is working? Or not? You can hear me though? I can't do much about the echo, I don't think. Okay. Cool. So, yeah, it looks like there's only a couple of you here. So maybe I'll give it a couple minutes, but I don't really have anything planned. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to talk about. I was just going to go over sort of early season results and then potentially look at a couple bets for today. But I don't know if you guys have questions or want to go over anything. Let me know. This is the first time I'm doing this. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit awkward. So it's probably not going to be the best stream ever, but yeah. So to start the season, it's been 3 betting days. Sorry, how many betting days? 3 betting days, and we're down a tad. Not a lot, not anything to write home about. Down 1.5 units. And the thing with this is people freak out. But if you look, like, first of all, again, it's 3 days. I've had losing months, and I don't suspect this is going to be a losing month. But if you look, like, average odds, for instance, we're betting, like, mainly pretty large underdogs, right? Like 2.54. So, and right now our win percentage is 38%. And so if we just do, divide this, that gives us 39%. So like our implied probabilities from what our average odds are is right around what our win percentage is, right? So we're losing like 1% below where we're expected to be given these odds. And that makes sense if you look at these bets. Like, not one to make excuses, but again, and I'll just pull this profit over so you can see the difference. So for instance, last night, Vancouver, Ottawa, we had the over 6.5. Vancouver won 5-1, right? They scored fairly early in the third period, and then both teams just sort of sat back. Ottawa had a power play late. They didn't really do anything. And so this 6.5, we lose by half a goal. Easily could have hit the over there. Chicago, Nashville. Chicago was a big dog, 2.55. They lost in a shootout. If you're going to give me 2.55 odds every game and tell me that every game is going to go to a shootout, you're going to print money, right? So bad side of variance there. They lose in a shootout. This parlay, which is stupid. I don't usually bet parlays, but they were all teams the model liked, but I didn't really feel like letting that much juice. So if we look at it, Dallas winner, Colorado blowout winner. I think they won 7-2 or something like that. Vegas, they were down the whole game. They came back, made it 4-4, and they lost in a shootout again. So there's 2 shootout losses, and we lose the over by half a goal. Arizona, they lost 1-0 for the second game in a row. And Calgary lost by 1 goal. So my point is, like, obviously, if you take literally any one of these games, so even let's take the smallest bet, which was this Calgary bet. If this changes from a loss to a win, we're profitable on the year. So it's literally, it's been 3 betting days, and you never like to start out down, but it's been just some variance, right? And that happens. We're talking about 16 bets here. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Does that make sense? Like, I wouldn't be too worried. Oh, and the other thing, this one here. So yeah, this is a loss, but this was also just a live hedge on this Colorado Anaheim game. We took Anaheim ahead of the game, and they were up 2-0 going into the third, and we could buy Colorado at 7.4. So I was of the mindset, I'm just going to lock it. It's either going to be a small profit either way, because we had lost a couple bets, or if Anaheim ended up losing it would be a small loss. So might as well just hedge a little bit there. So it was a $10 bet to lock in profit. So obviously that's going to be a loss. So you take that out of the equation. Like, it is what it is. I'm not too concerned about it. Like if we go back to this is from COVID, so it's mainly baseball, but there's a little bit of hockey. But if we scroll through, oh, you can't see that, can you? How can I get this to move? I'll just do it like this. So if we scroll through, this is all COVID. And actually, I'll move over. Like we had some pretty nasty swings in baseball, right? Like we started out. This is daily profit we're looking at here. So the first month of the season was just okay. And then in August, we had a big August. Like we did a lot of damage in August, profit wise, but we had some huge swings, right? Like here's a $545 profit day, and then 4 days later we lost $400, and then like some pretty gnarly swings here, like 118, 315. And a couple modest profit days to make it back up, like here's $1,000 right here almost. And then it goes like this, right? And like here, this was a gross, like beginning September, this first week was, other than the first day where we got off to a hot start, this first week was horrendous. But if you look at it over the grand scheme of things, and let's see if I can pull this back up here. Our baseball record, our ROI was absolutely massive, right? Our yield shrunk a little bit. So Matt, the only thing I did was I started playing around with, because to start with, I had pitchers at the last 14 days. So thinking there you get like 3 or 4 starts from starting pitcher. But then looking at lefties, because they were, or sorry, that would be I apologize. I took 14-day team stats versus pitchers. And the only thing I did is I readjusted. So against like team stats versus righties, I kept it 14 days, but I expanded the team stats against lefties from 14 to 30 because there are fewer. I was noticing there are a lot fewer outings where a team in a given 2.5 weeks are going to face lefties to get reliable sample data. So that was really the only thing I did. Is I played around with just adjusting the data for the lefties. But then I also did some analysis at the end of the season, and something like 85%, 81 or 85% of all my baseball profit came from first 5 inning bets. So that's something that going into this upcoming season, I'm going to be looking at. Yeah, exactly. Far fewer lefties. But yeah, this upcoming season, I'm going to be looking at probably focusing more on first 5. Just because, again, like the yield was way higher, the ROI was way higher, and if I can make almost the same amount of money by risking, half or 2/3, I'm all for that. Mitigating that risk, because especially like August 1st onwards, it was really just heavily skewed towards the first 5. And then a couple times throughout the season, I did, like, especially like for members who are like betting the same picks and stuff like that, I looked at just doing first 5, but it was such a small sample size that I didn't want to change the strategy mid-season, because by the time I had enough data to do the analysis, it wasn't it wasn't going to be profitable in the short term to make that switch. We sort of just had to ride it out. And now that I have that and I can look back, I can make the adjustments going forward. So I don't know if that makes sense. Mark's sports betting. Is there? First of all, thank you. The look at my tracking sheet. So you can actually download this. I think it's members only. I can't remember on the site, but you can actually make a template that you can download and use. Was there anything specific that you would like to know about the records I keep, Mark? If you're still here. All right. Well, I'll move on for now. Okay. So, So we sort of covered where we're at going into the season. Again, I'm not too worried about it. Um. So what we could look at is maybe some bets, potentially upcoming bets for today or something like that. Oh, thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. It's super important. I don't know if you've seen, but I have a video, one of my more popular videos on YouTube. It's like 10 tips for to make more profit sports betting. I forget the exact title, but that's a big thing is accurate record keeping, right? Like if you don't know where you're profitable, then you're gonna have a bad time. And I don't like guessing. Hunter, I use mainly Fangraphs. Um, I have to think. Yeah, I think it's either all Fangraphs or like 95% Fangraphs. I might use Baseball Reference for an odd thing or two there, but the majority is Fangraphs. Especially because for baseball, I sort of take like a hybrid approach. So for batting stats, I'll use team stats. But for pitching stats, obviously, like I'll use individual pitching stats. And Fangraphs they have so much good stuff there. And then the only other thing I use ESPN for park factors, just if I'm factoring in mainly for totals, which I don't bet a lot of totals. Like I include totals in a lot of my models, but I really they're more for reference. Like I don't bet a lot of totals. How many plays on average do it really varies, Mark. I don't like to bet just to bet, so I try and keep it low, like 4 or 5. Like if there's 10 hockey games on, in my perfect world, I'm not betting more than 3 or 4 of them. But obviously I go off of sort of like what the stats are giving me. Sometimes you're going to be betting, 10 out of 12 games, and other times you're going to be betting 1 or none. It really depends. But I try not to force anything. And especially early on in the season, I'm really careful about not overvaluing model plays because I don't trust early season data for any sport, really, right? Like there's just a lot of variance, especially like guys are getting used to new teams, and certainly with like the last 10 months with COVID, it's just like changed everything and made everything very, very strange. So I my preference is to keep volume lower as opposed to higher, but again, I'll go with what the model's sort of giving me on that given day. But I'm also, I don't know if I can, how do I do this? Let's see if I can pull this up. I need another monitor. That's the thing. I'm switching from the laptop to the desktop. Now I'm down to one monitor, and it makes things trickier. to navigate. It's a big monitor. It's like 32-inch monitor. But Ben, I would say hockey's my favorite sport to bet on. MLB is a close second. Those are really the only two. Those are the two sports I take seriously that I bet seriously on. Definitely. So here is the new model that I'm sort of working on. Big totals guy. Yeah, I think that's reasonable, Mark. Like I mainly like use a modified Kelly criterion for my bet sizes, but I think 1 to 3 plays at 1% each is certainly reasonable, especially if you're playing with a larger bankroll. If that's what I try and tell people. Like if you can reload easily, like if you're getting, I don't know, if it's an entertainment expense and you can reload easily, then have at it, right? If you want to make some stupid parlays, chasing, a lot of ticket, if you want to bet larger and it's for fun, then by all means go for it. But if you're trying to treat this as sort of like an investment and you want to stay in the game and be profitable, then taking your bankroll and bankroll management in general just becomes a lot more important. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. This is literally, so I built this whole model in Python, and the only reason that I've exported it to a sheet is so I could format it like this. I just find I like building stuff in Python because it's more flexible. I know, and Matt, I know you're a member, so like I teach you guys how to build stuff in Excel, obviously, and in Google Sheets, and that's great, and you can do a lot of good stuff with it. I find personally you can just do more with Python or R or whatever. You're not limited. Like for instance, in Excel, you're limited to like 16 features, right? To run a regression. Whereas Python, you can run as many as you want. And you can run different types of regression sort of instantly and figure out what works. So I prefer to do that. It's tougher to teach though, which is, so I'm thinking about maybe starting to offer that in the membership, expanding just out of the Excel into some more stuff. But I'm not as comfortable teaching Python stuff just because the learning curve is a lot higher. And my patience isn't the best. And I bash around a lot type thing. But yeah, I exported this data into the Google Sheet just so I could format it because I think it looks cool. Hey, Mystery. So I was just saying, right now I just teach Excel and Sheets, but I'm toying with the idea of starting to teach one of Python or R, probably Python. I use Python more than R, if I'm being realistic. So it's not something at this moment, but it's definitely something I'm considering for the future. Yeah, Hunter, you can definitely look at doing something like that. The Kelly is basically, it's telling you, given your edge, and it's important that you're realistic about what your edge is, right? Because all edges are perceived edge. I could say, yeah, I have a 5% edge on this game, but do I really? It's tough to say. No one really knows. But given that information, it's just giving you an optimal percentage of your bankroll to bet to profit. And that's the key. That's why I don't use a full Kelly. I don't recommend using full Kelly, because it's not looking to limit your downside or your risk of ruin. It's purely looking to maximize potential profit. And obviously there's a lot of variance, so you need to be careful. But I think it might be reasonable to, you might have better luck, Hunter, running like a Monte Carlo simulation for that or something. So that's another thing. I know you're a member too, if you go on the Slack and look, I've talked about that, where essentially you can just write a formula and do a Monte Carlo simulation for percentage of the time that team covers the total, and then take that as your percentage and compare it to the bookmaker. So you could do something like that as well. So this should be updated. So I don't know if we want to look at like a couple potential bets for today or something like that. It's really up to you guys, but I can pull up how much should I put into fading public and sharp money. Honestly, if I'm completely transparent, Mark, I don't. I trust what I build, and I trust my numbers, and if the price I'm getting is the right price, then I bet it. I really don't take public consideration or sharp money into too much account, and some people could look down on that, but that's just me. I focus on the numbers. The numbers that my model is driving, and put my faith in that. But I mean, the Action Network, no affiliation with me or anything like that. They show some like sharp money and Steam and stuff like that. So like that's a potential source if you're looking for that kind of thing. I don't know if they, with their free account, I don't know if you can see that, but I know like their paid account's like $9 a month or something like that. Okay, let me pull up some odds here and we can see. So I don't know. And full disclosure, I already made a couple bets last night. So I might make a couple bets like live here, but really I'm just gonna go through, and I'm gonna talk about my process a little bit, because especially early on in the season, I use sort of a different approach, or a hybrid approach, we'll call it. So the first thing is, and I don't have it up anymore, but my bankroll I'm using is $2,500, but you'll see here I'm already adjusting this as if it was $1,000 bankroll. And the reason for that is, again, I don't trust data from early season games, and I don't have, like, some of these teams have only played one or two games because I split everything home and away, right? So you can see like some of these we won't even register, like Dallas, for instance. If Dallas is away, they haven't played enough games to hit enough stats that go into the model to populate this, so I won't be using it. So, but let's look at it. So the first one is, I was looking at this last night, I guess. So Philly and New Jersey. So based on that, we have New Jersey as a slight favorite, 52.6. And for those of you new to like how my models work or whatever, it's pretty simple. The interface anyway. So I derive these expected goals based on a bunch of stats that I use, that I pull in the back end, and then I turn that into an attacking strength and a defensive strength. And then based on attacking and defensive strength, I can compare two teams to each other and see what their win probability would be. So I use a Poisson distribution, which is this cool looking thing over here, and that derives sort of my win probability. And from there, I get my odds. And I use decimal odds because they're A, easier to compute, and B, they're more accurate, because American odds are just basically it's a rounding calculation on decimal odds, but that's neither here nor there. If you want to use American odds, have at it. I just find it way easier to do calculations using decimal odds. So, and then the only other thing I need to input here is the odds that the bookmaker is giving. So right now, I'm using Pinnacle because I'm in Canada. So we get 1.632 on Philly. and 2.42 on jersey. And when I do that, it calculates the win probability. And this is the implied probability. Now, this is actually normalized to 100% here. You can see what the actual, like what these odds really mean are down here. Can you see that? Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. Okay, yeah, you can see that. So that is down here. And this essentially is including the juice. So this, you can calculate the juice on a bet by that. And then I just normalize it to be juice free. And based on these numbers, if it's a good bet, it will spit out the expected value and the calorie criterion. And for me, I'll only make a bet if the EV is above this threshold. And I've come to this threshold through a bunch of back testing and things like that. To be honest, I should probably be testing it more. This is based on like last season data, so this might not even be correct. But that's just what I've used. And then I'm using an 18% calorie criterion, which is, again, just based on backtesting and data. So I haven't updated either of those things, which is why maybe some of these are a little off. But anyway, so in this case, I would bet New Jersey. And I would bet, if I'm strictly following the Kelly, based on my parameters, I'd bet $35. And then if I want to get fancy, and I do this to keep track because sometimes I'll just go through and I'll place all my bets at the end. It's not something like you have to do or anything like that, but I will usually just add bets. And I'll also do this because I play a little bit of daily fantasy, and I've built my own projections and things like that for my daily fantasy, and I use my expected goals from the model. So even if I'm not betting a game, I'm not going to do it here, but by the end of it, I'll add every game being played that day, so I can just easily copy and paste it. But these are just like make my life easier macros. Nothing really of value there that I couldn't just copy and paste it or just add the bet as they come. But let's look at a couple others. So and literally, so I would just go through the slate, and I usually I don't make my bets until the end, and the reason I'll get into that in a second. So who do we have? We have Pittsburgh, and I'm not even going to go further, so we can see based on this. Who are they playing? Boston. So this wouldn't be a bet because we don't have the correct data for Pittsburgh yet. So if we look at them here, you can see they don't satisfy the criteria for all of the feature selection for the goals for, and therefore we can't drive an attacking strength on the road for them. So we will just skip that one. Easy. And then I just go down the list. So I know Tampa. It's going to be the same thing with Tampa and Carolina. So I'll just show you. So no value there. Florida. I know my model likes Florida a lot. Where are they? They're there. Florida. And Columbus. So it's got Florida as a slight favorite. But then again, odds are everything, so it's got them at 1.98 and 1.925. So you can see here, even though I like Florida, the model likes Florida, it's too close. It's very similar to what the bookmaker is actually imputing, so this wouldn't be a bet for me. So I just move on and keep going down the list. So we can do I think I looked at this one last night too. If we do the Islanders and Washington, it really likes Washington, which is surprising. And again, this is using data from this season only, and so like it understands that, you know, like Ovechkin and Kuznetsov and a couple of their guys haven't been in the lineup, but they're still playing because their underlying numbers are actually decent. So 1.8 819 for the Islanders, and the Caps are at 2.1. So this would be a good bet here. I'd add it to my list. And so on and so forth. Calgary and Montreal. So this is going to be one. I just know Montreal is not going to have value here. And if you're just joining, that's because they don't meet the criteria. They haven't played enough games at home to get enough data to satisfy my model. So there are no play there. Rangers and Buffalo. So the Rangers at 1.847 and Buffalo at 2.07. So this is liking the Rangers slightly. Again, the bookmaker has them as a favorite, as 53% favorite, and I have them at around 61% or 62% favorite. And again, I'm not, even though I'm collecting this data and these are saying bet, I'm not making these bets yet. And another thing that you can do, if you want a sanity check, there are good places you can go to look at models. I take Money Puck with a grain of salt, but sometimes it's nice to see it where I'm in line and interesting to see where I'm different than Money Puck, for instance. So here you can see the Rangers. They have the Rangers as an underdog, whereas we have them as a favorite. But then we're both in agreement with, say, Washington. We like Florida more than they do, type thing like that. So this is just a sanity check. I caution you though, and in years past I've done some analysis where using too many sources and comparing too many sources to try and get a consensus has actually yielded more poorer results. So I wouldn't just say that this has to match up exactly with your model to bet it. Otherwise, you'd be better off just using Money Puck straight up or something like that, which I also don't advise you do. I know there's some people who do that and they've tracked the results and their results are very swingy. But I digress. So anyways, I would just keep going through this. So let's look at Los Angeles, for instance, and Minnesota. Los Angeles and Los Angeles. That's not what we want. We want Minnesota. So you can see it loves the Kings, which is very interesting to me because people typically think Los Angeles is not great. And Minnesota's actually been fairly decent. So here we already know, the model loves LA, and they're priced as a big dog. So it's going to tell us to bet quite a bit. And so I'll add it for now. But I'm always curious. So I'll go into just some raw data here and look at away stats and see. So Los Angeles, even though they have enough data to satisfy our model, they've only played 3 games on the road, right? And some of these you can see because we're still very early into the season, teams typically have played 2, 3, 1, and only a few have played 7 or 8 games. The Sharks, they've played all their games on the road so far. So that's something I take into consideration and a grain of salt as well. Especially I'll retrain my model every couple. I should probably do it more, but I retrain it every couple weeks, and just to help it get better and keep learning type thing. But I'm always a little bit hesitant here because bookmakers are still smart and they're still sharp, right? So this is a huge discrepancy. And I mean, there could be value, but what I would be more inclined to do here, rather than betting the full, recommended Kelly, in this case, if I really thought that the model was onto something and that this edge was, 26%, which it's not, I would maybe just bet the expected value, right? So instead of betting 78, maybe I bet 49. Mark, a lot. I'm not going to divulge, but a lot of different stats. I think I use like 23 different stats for goals for and 21 for goals against or something like that. Um, but yeah, continuing on. So and again, like go down the road. So this next one, I keyed on this one. I was looking at this last night too. Appreciate that, Elliot. Thank you. So this next one's interesting because Detroit and Dallas. Dallas, it's gonna be like 96 or 97% favored for Dallas, which is just yeah, that's right, Elliot. Positive EV. That's all that matters. um, this is insanity, though, right? Like in the NHL, especially, 40. I think it's like 41% of the time the underdog wins, and this just isn't realistic. And the other thing to keep in mind is because teams have played so few games, this data is still very skewed. So here's a good example. So even though the model likes a good fit, with Dallas, their expected goals for at home is 4.17. But if you look at their games, they've only played 3 games, and they've only scored 12 goals total, only, which obviously averages 4 goals a game, which would be reasonable, except their first game really skews that because they scored 7 goals in their first game. So if you normalize that, like this 4.17 is extremely high. So I would just take that with a grain of salt. And again, anytime you have like something skewed like that, this is clearly an outlier, and it clearly just doesn't make sense. So I wouldn't bet it here. And then depending on the price, so like we have 261 and 1.55. So even like the bookmaker thinks, Dallas is a 63% favorite, which is probably reasonable, given that Detroit's not very good, although they did take them to overtime the other night when they played. But at 63%, you're not getting much value out of that bet. So I maybe look at something like potentially like a puck line or something like that, depending on the odds or the price of a puck line, which I'll check quickly. Right now, puck line's paying 2.47. So let's just use this here. So we'll just say equals 1 divided by 2.47. So that's an implied probability of roughly 40%. And Dallas, in our model, they cover the puck line. Sorry, I'm doing this live and it's slow. So they're covering the puck line almost 90% of the time in this model. But again, this is very skewed because of that 4.17 goals. So it's up to you. I would probably just forego this because you're going to be paying so much juice unless you play the puck line, and you don't really have a ton of data on them there. So that's how I would personally do it. But everyone's different, obviously. And I just keep going through them. So, I mean, I'm not going to... I guess there's only a couple more games, so I'll keep going. But Anaheim, same thing. We don't have value there, so skip them. San Jose and Colorado. So Colorado is obviously going to be a huge favorite. It's going to be similar to what we just talked about with Dallas and Detroit. So I'm probably not going to bother with them either. If you really were desperate, like you could look at. Actually, I'm not even gonna say. I was gonna say, but like maybe do a parlay between Colorado and Dallas, but it's just I don't know. I wouldn't do that. I'm not a huge fan of parlays. And then we have the Leafs, and my model absolutely hates the Leafs. And Edmonton. Oh, never mind. My model loves the Leafs. Sorry, I was thinking about something else. So again, this is similar boat. I don't think there's any world, and even if we like, let's correct the odds. So 2.15. I don't see any world where Toronto beats Edmonton 85 or 83% of the time. It's just not realistic, right? I don't even think 60-40 is realistic. And if that's the case, like even if it's 60-40, that's 5% of value. So you're probably making a marginal bet, but this is still off. And again, it's because this is early in the season, things are skewed. So I like to try and use minimum 10 games, and for some of these it's like 2 or 3 games. And the other thing that is important is you could obviously you could adjust this. So I could include, like, I could say, give me the last 10 games between this season and last season. So for teams who played 7 games, it's only going to pull three games worth of data, and I'm fine with that because it's going to be mainly new stats. But for some of these other teams who played 1 or 2 games, now all of a sudden you're bringing in like 6, 7, 8 games from last season, and for a lot of these teams, that's 10 plus months ago, and it's just I'm more comfortable to just look at this season's data and make some adjustments early on, rather than sacrifice and potentially use old data from last season. Johnny, I was just talking about that. I know my size of data is too small. I literally just went over that now, which is why you're seeing this, because some of these teams have played so few games. I'm aware of that. And then Ottawa and Vancouver. So Ottawa is going to get smoked here. Again, and you can see this doesn't add up to 100, and the reason is because of the Poisson distribution. Given that Ottawa's given up so many goals and Vancouver scoring so many, it thinks that there's a realistic possibility that one team could either allow or score higher than 10 goals, which I'm not going to build that into the model because it's stupid. So that's what I would typically do. So you could see, like, I only have a few bets here today, potentially, and then from here, I would look at, like, this LA one. I'm likely not going to bet that much on LA. I'd probably bet closer to just the expected value number there. And that's early season NHL, right? Like, you want to bet, you want to get in the action, but you also need to understand that because you don't have a lot of data, it's you're going to have to make adjustments or use old data, which sucks. So hopefully that makes sense. That's sort of my process. Nothing too crazy. And then I would just place these bets and go about my day and then do some analysis afterwards. I also try and at least have the NHL Network on for a little while to see if there's any potential live bet opportunity. So one thing I do love doing, and that I often do, if there's a large favorite that you don't want to pay a lot of juice on, so maybe it's like Colorado or Dallas, if they go down early, and you can set up like a Google alert or something like that for scoring updates, but if they go down by like 1 early, you can often buy them live at like a relatively reasonable price, and that's been a pretty profitable strategy for me, especially for West Coast games. 2 years ago, I want to say. Um, I made a ton of money doing that, betting against San Jose, because they, for whatever reason, they would go up early in a lot of games, and then they would just um, punt the lead back, and it was like printing money for like a month and a half straight. It was awesome. Um, what kind of analysis do I do after the season? Well, I look at where I was profitable and where I wasn't, and look at my yield. The yield is a big thing, right? So like I think yield is probably more important than ROI, because if you have a low yield, you're risking so much more money. And if things seem out of whack, or if I, like, say I had like this happened I forget when, like maybe 2 years ago, I had a profitable year, but like 95% of my profits came in a 30-day span. I want to figure out like why is that happening, and see if there are any trends from years past. Like a trend that I noticed for hockey is, for whatever reason, post All-Star break, I get crushed. Not post All-Star break to the end of the year, but like if All-Star break's like Feb 15th, from Feb 15th till March 15th for that month, I'll get just destroyed. And I think it's because by that time teams are sort of out of the race, so they're potentially giving some younger players like more ice time, things like that, while other teams are like right in the thick of it. And then that's when like injuries and stuff catch up with teams, and then sort of like down the stretch, after that blip, down the stretch when people are fighting, or teams are fighting to get into the playoffs, profits pick up again, and again. So it's not. It's not. I don't have anything to quantify it. I just know based on like my results, that's how it's been in years past. So it's something I'll watch out for, and maybe I'll bet less, or try and tighten up the screws on things that way. But yeah, the analysis, it really depends, based on sport. Like I was saying earlier with MLB, I really look at bet type too, and like what bet types are profitable. If derivative markets have been more profitable, then I'll figure out why, or like if there are leaks in my model. So I found a leak in my MLB model where I was taking the bullpen into consideration, but the way I was doing it didn't really make sense. And I was almost double counting righties against lefties, which I don't have a good way to explain it here, but essentially it was basically being very detrimental, and I think a lot of that was why my first 5 bets were so much more successful, because they don't factor in bullpen at all. So yeah, it really depends. But anyways, yeah, I don't know. Do you guys have any other questions? If not, I'll probably call it a day. I don't know if this was useful. It's fun to do. It's confusing me, but it's been a reasonable time. All right. Well, I think I'm going to end it there then. And yeah, I'm going to try and do this like Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe. But if you're not a member and you're interested in learning more about how to build models, become more profitable, whatever, sign up, actionbackers.com. And if you use code WELCOME20, you'll get $20 off your first month, which is pretty cool. And you'll learn sort of the ins and outs of starting to build a model and gather stats and data and things like that. Yanni, yeah, I do separately. No problem, Matt. I'll see you in the Slack channel later anyways. I know you're in there asking questions, which is awesome. Yanni, I do, but I've also, in years past, not put a ton of stock into it because I bet a lot of underdogs. And depending on what I'm betting, I'm getting a better price. Like I'll often bet openers just to get a better price. If I'm betting lower, like if I'm only betting, $70 or $80, then I find more value in just betting the opener rather than waiting to see what the line does and tracking the closing line. But typically been ahead of the line like a decent rate. Like I'd say like 60-ish%. So not like anything crazy, but still beat the line on a fairly regular basis. Cool. All right. I'll see you guys next time.